And I can't think of any child out there, teen or preteen, that doesn't have a very vivid imagination about things. I did, in the things you come up with, or so it is. It's sort of a realistic part there to every youngster.
Right, and you can carry through that with books. It's a good way to get them hooked on reading, because the books end up being an extension of that imagination. Absolutely. And getting them hooked on reading is one of my big goals.
Which is very important today. It's nice to see the younger generation starting to read. Either way, I mean, even if you're an older individual and you haven't read before and you start to, I hope that they continue to read and learn.
Yeah, that's a good point, Chris. In fact, I work part-time for a local library here, and there's a woman who comes in, and she's probably near 70, and she just within the last year started reading. Not because she couldn't read, but I don't know if it was a parent or somebody told her when she was young that if she read too much, she would end up going blind. And so she just never read because she was so fearful of losing her sight. She stayed away from books. And like I said, over the last year, she started actually reading, got over that fear somehow, and she's probably read upward of 100 books already.
That's amazing.
She's developed this love of books, this love of reading, and she just can't get enough of it. She's in there probably every other day looking for new material to read. And that's the kind of stuff we want to engender in people, and if we can start them younger than that. I mean, it's great to see older people doing it, and that's a wonderful thing. But to get them younger and to feed that thirst for knowledge it will solve a whole lot of other problems that we have now.
Where do you see fantasy novels, perhaps in the next 5 years? Do you believe it's going to be a phase that'll come and go? Will it sustain a lengthy period of time?
Well, I think there are certain elements that'll be phases. I don't think vampires are going to be, the thing forever, of course.
That's really popular now, too.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when Boy Wizards was the only thing to read. Now it's vampires, and then it'll be, zombies, or who knows? It'll be something else. But I think as a genre, I think fantasy is growing. Now, I'm sure every genre has a peak, and it reaches an apex, and it kind of falls off. I think that's natural, and fantasy will probably see that, where it'll reach its high point, and it just won't be able to sustain it, and it will drop off a little bit, I'm sure. But I think it's always going to be there to a certain extent, because it supplies the basic need. Sure. With fantasy, there really are no boundaries. There are no real rules. You can create your world, and you can do pretty much whatever you want with it. That's always going to appeal to people.
I tend to see, the teen novels and books, the vampire craze that's going on right now. But I'm seeing also that Western novels, our paperbacks, are making kind of a comeback a little bit.
I think that's right, and you make a good point, particularly about Westerns. They kind of died in the 80s or 70s or late 70s, something like that. And they existed. They didn't die, but they weren't really that respected of a genre. I know a few years ago, actually, I wrote a Western. People are like, why? Nobody's reading Westerns. Why are you writing a Western? And I never wrote another one. But things do come and go, and I think that just like fantasies and the genres that we mentioned have their time in the sun, so to speak, and then they go away for a while. People forget about them, and then somebody writes a breakout novel in that genre, and people they remember it. Oh yeah, this is really great. Remember when we were reading this? And then other authors write more, and it becomes a fad. Everybody reads it, they tell somebody else about it, and it's a word of mouth kind of thing. Then people get tired of it, and they move on to something else. It's that way with everything, really.
I notice that sometimes you tend to put a deadline on your projects. Is that to maybe push you to complete the project? Like you said, you can find any way you can to not write. Do you do that sometimes just to kind of push you into completing a writing project?
I think it's important, at least for me, because, like you said, it's too easy to find ways not to write. And if I don't have that in front of me, I tend to, well, I've got plenty of time. Actually, I still do that with deadlines. It's like, well, it's 6 months away. I've got plenty of time. Mm-hmm. And then I come up, a couple months away, and like, oh no, and I've got to suspend all other life activities in order to finish this manuscript. But at least I do get it done. So you can imagine what I used to do when I didn't have a deadline. It would never get done. I would get halfway through and get bored with it and get away from the manuscript. And it's really tough for me once I get away from something to go back to it, because then you have to go back and read it and figure out exactly what you were talking about. So the deadline for me is vital. So it's been really valuable to me. Tough. It's tough to put a deadline on yourself and stick to it. Mm-hmm. But it's been really productive and useful for me. So I'd recommend that people try it.